All right, we're going to get started. If we please continue to say hello in the chat box and let us know you're there. But welcome everybody. Greg Reibman, president of the chamber, here with you today. Our thanks to the UMass Amherst at Mount Ida campus for sponsoring our event today. And Congressman Auchincloss, welcome. Great to see you again. How are you?
Good to be here, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. We're delighted to have you. We've got about an hour together and a lot of things I want to talk about, but let's start right at the beginning. How are you? How's your family? Your wife, Michelle, Teddy, and Grace, your 2 kids. Everybody okay?
Everybody's doing well, thank you. We were able to spend the holidays with Michelle's family and with mine, which is nice, and the same kind of COVID testing disruptions that I'm sure everybody on this call experienced in one form or another. Thankfully, none of the travel disruptions that unfortunately some of these people on the call I'm sure also experienced. And in general, this last year, and the last 2 years broadly, have been personally really wonderful for me because Teddy and Grace have both come into the world. Teddy's 1.5 years, Grace is 5 months. And we've actually had 2 pandemic babies, which I think when we had Teddy at the beginning of the pandemic, we were not planning on having a second one during the pandemic, but they're both sleeping through the night. They're both healthy. And although they both have a cold right now, unfortunately, so you may hear some screeching in the background.
Fair enough. Good to hear. And I know that COVID has really gone through the halls of Congress too. Your staff is okay?
Some of my staff have gotten COVID. I have not as of yet. But it, as you said, yes, it's run rampant. I mean, it's everywhere. It's 1 million cases a day right now, and I think we're going to continue to see it spread pretty quickly throughout the course of at least the first few weeks of January.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So when I want to take some time and talk about this past year. A year ago yesterday, you were sworn in to the 117th Congress. You were 32 years old. A year from tomorrow, you were the first-hand witness to an insurrection. Let's start with talking about 1 year ago today. So the day after you became a new congressman, the day before the insurrection. Did you have a sense of what was going to happen? Did you have any idea what was ahead?
I knew before even swearing into office that 2021 was going to be a volatile year politically, given the divisions from the election, given the incredible challenges of the pandemic and the recession facing the new president. So the intensity of the last year was not a surprise. Of course, I did not predict an actual insurrection at the Capitol. And I can still remember, waking up the morning of January 6th early, and I was in Washington, and I roomed with another member of Congress. And we forget this now, but the very, very early morning of January 6th, the Georgia results came back, and Democrats had taken the 2 Georgia Senate seats. And I called out to my roommate. I said, "This is going to be a good day. We took Georgia." And one of the all-time worst calls, I think. And all through the morning, I did not think that the crowd was going to reach violent mass. Actually, I really, personally got that one wrong. I remember seeing, though, when they were massing and the Capitol Police were lined up in formation, and I remember seeing the Capitol Police stagger. And I was a Marine officer, as you know, Greg, and we practiced a lot of crowd control techniques heading into Afghanistan. One of the first things you learn is that you can't stagger when you're trying to do crowd control, because if you create gaps side by side and people get through you, they get behind you, and then the whole line breaks, and it becomes a self-catalyzing event where one small crack in the line will create many. And I remember watching the line stagger and realizing, they're going to get in the cap. Like, this is over. The line is staggered and it's going to break, and they're going to get in.
So where did you actually see that from? From a window in your office, or?
No, from the TV in my office, actually.
Oh, yeah.
We were barricaded in the office and saw it, and it was being reported live. And it happened like that, obviously, as these things do, gradually and then suddenly. So that was definitely a stark day. I think tomorrow, as we commemorate it, the most important thing for me is that we not treat it as a historical event. This is not a day to be consecrated and inscribed into the history books and reflected upon and speechified about. This is current events. This is happening now. We are in the middle of a constitutional crisis where the majority of the GOP thinks that the election was stolen in 2020. And that fact, despite at this point being well known, does not lose any of its incredible relevance. A majority of GOP voters think the election was stolen in 2020. And the groundwork is being laid for a repeat in 2024. And so we need to commemorate January 6th, not with symbols, but with substance. We need to pass the Protect Democracy Act, and we need to pass the Freedom to Vote Act.
So I want to go back just a step, and then we can go forward and talk about some of those things. But so, I mean, you probably didn't even know where the bathrooms were at that point. I mean, you were brand new to this building, right? And at some point you had to call your wife and tell her you were okay, I presume, right? I'm just trying to get a sense of really the chaos, and, you know, yeah, you had some military training, so maybe you felt more comfortable than some people, but.
Absolutely. I mean, it was it felt like a fortress. And then that evening, as the National Guard descended on the Capitol, it felt like a patrol base. And that's a really disheartening ambiance to have in the People's House. It felt as though it didn't feel like we were in lockdown, and there were National Guardsmen and women patrolling with assault rifles throughout the entire building. And Greg, like you said, I didn't even really know how to get from my office to the Capitol floor yet. So I was wandering through different labyrinths in the basement, bumping into battalions. It's horrible. And then walking onto the House floor and having broken glass, and the atmosphere in the House chamber as Republicans were standing up and voting to decertify the election results, despite the insurrection we had just been a part of, was to me, the nadir of American democracy in my lifetime. And hopefully it stays that way. Hopefully it doesn't get, we don't see a worse performance 4 years from now, 3 years from now.
So let me ask you about that. So you're the new guy, you're just getting to know your colleagues. Your colleagues take a vote that feels reprehensible. We've all had workplaces where we've had creepy colleagues, but I think this probably takes the cake. How do you deal with and interact with those, the men and women who voted to not certify the election that day?
I was one of the first members of Congress to announce I wasn't going to be working with members who had voted to decertify. So I don't co-sponsor, I don't co-lead letters. And I do that with extreme introspection beforehand. I am not somebody, and Greg, hopefully you saw this when I was a city councilor. I don't like to cast aspersions on people's motives when they disagree with me. I don't think that's a productive way to go about things. We have a policy disagreement. Let's talk about the policy disagreement. Let's assume good intentions on one another's behalves and tackle the issue, not the person. And I try to approach that with a whole range of issues, even sensitive ones, even ones that I feel passionate about, ones like gun violence, where I just cannot imagine how you could think it's okay for someone to just be able to buy an assault weapon over the counter. I'm still willing to come to the table and listen and try to understand and work with somebody. On this issue, though, it really is just a red line, a bright red line for me. You don't vote for the free and orderly transfer of power in our democracy after a quarter of a millennium, then we just have different values. And I'm not going to be working with those folks until they assert publicly that Joe Biden won a free and fair election.
So what does that mean? How does that translate? You're walking down the hall and one of your colleagues who voted against it is on that. You go to the other side. I'm trying to understand how even physically what that's like when you're working in the same place.
I mean, it doesn't translate into I'm not crossing the hallway to avoid eye contact. It's not like that. What it means is there's a filter on our co-sponsorship and co-sign requests. So to give people a sense of the congressional kind of workflow, hundreds of bills, hundreds of letters, hundreds of resolutions are constantly fluttering around Capitol Hill. People are emailing each other like a gajillion of these at all times. 435 members of Congress who each have a gajillion ideas, right? And there's a number of filters that we place on that, right? There's a couple of key issues that I care about. There's district level priorities. There's committees that I'm on. So we have a number of different filters that you can put on this huge amount of noise to try to derive some signal. And we've just added another filter of, well, is this person leading this legislation or this letter, did they vote in favor of our democracy or not? And if not, then it's just a very simple no.
So got it. And so let's talk in general about that idea of balancing all the different things you have to do as a congressman and all the different interests and things going on. Barney Frank once said to me that he felt he was well suited to be a congressman because he had a short attention span. And it feels like he was always moving on to something else. How do you balance that, all the different things that are happening at any one time?
Yeah, there is certainly every 30 minutes, I'm called to engage in a different subject. It's mental health for students in one 30-minute block, and then it's water infrastructure, and then it's crypto regulation. I love that personally. It's an intellectual buffet for me. I think it's a strength of mine that I can get up to speed quickly on an issue and I try to ask good questions as opposed to feeling like I got the answers at all times. So I love that part, and there I would share Barney Frank's assessment. I think where it's probably a little different between me and Barney, at least at the later stage of his career, is that when you're chairman of the Financial Services Committee and a 25, 30-year veteran, almost by necessity, because you're chair and because you're so senior, you're able to spread yourself very thin and almost need to. As a freshman member, at a time when we've got tight margins in the House and a very senior mass delegation, I've wanted to be a little bit more focused and disciplined because I'm learning how the House works, and I'm not the chairman of a committee. And so it's important that I dig deep on a few key issues, establish credibility and expertise, and try to drive some critical wins.
Yeah. Actually, I'm wondering about that. So you come in to this seat in this tradition, Barney Frank, Dryden, Kennedy, and you work alongside of Catherine Clark, Jim McGovern, Ariana Presley, Richard Neal. I mean, these are giant folks. Is that intimidating? How do you kind of fit into all that? And how does that feel?
No, it's not intimidating. I don't think in general, I don't think it's healthy to walk around Congress and be in awe of your colleagues. That's not a great way to get stuff done, because at times you got to be tough, and you got to have self-confidence and assertiveness in this business. Mm-hmm. What it does mean is that Massachusetts does really well for itself on the national stage. I mean, it's hard to convey all the different ways, but when you've got the chair of Ways and Means, for example, who was one of the final 3 to 5 people that the president's going to talk to when they're finalizing the American Rescue Plan, like that's a big deal for Massachusetts. That's a big deal for Massachusetts values and priorities. And the same goes for a lot of the other members as well of the delegation. I get to be a rookie in a lineup of cleanup hitters.
Mm-hmm. And you got to be a rookie in a year that impeached a president, that had to deal with a national health crisis and all the other things that happened it seemed like all in those first few weeks, there was always something really huge and still is, right?
Absolutely. And that, again, that to me is something I'm always grounding myself in, is that the first month of 2021 set the tenor, in the sense that we had the insurrection, obviously, we had the American Rescue Plan, which was trying to deal with the pandemic. But these are both current events. These are not, there's no time to sit there and be like, oh, look at all we've accomplished. Well, we got 1 million new cases a day of Omicron, and we are facing an ongoing threat to the integrity of our democracy. So the work continues.
Yeah. So let me ask you about the infrastructure bill. And first, the House passes the infrastructure bill only after being assured by the president and by your caucus that the Senate would pass Build Back Better, and they didn't. Did that leave you feeling like you were lied to? How did you react to that when it?
Well, I don't think anybody lied to anybody. I think the president said it's time to pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which I agreed with and have always agreed with. We got to pass that bill. This is $9 billion for Massachusetts, $1 billion for clean water, $2.5 billion to upgrade our transit, $4 billion for fixing roads and bridges. This is a historic generational investment in the competitiveness of our economy. And it demonstrates on the world stage that democracies can still get big things done. As the president said, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have said to him one-on-one, we don't think democracies can keep up with the pace of social and technological change in the 21st century. And part of what we're trying to do, part of what I think the legacy of the Biden administration needs to be, frankly, is showing again to ourselves as Americans and to the world who is watching us that democracy can function. And the bipartisan infrastructure bill has an impact not just in the dollars spent, but in the democratic capital that it accrues.
So maybe it wasn't that you were lied to, but there was certainly a perception that there was a deal in the Senate that would get the Build Back Better passed this year, and it didn't happen.
I mean, yeah, again, Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema never said that they were guaranteed to vote for the Build Back Better Act. So I did not, let me put it this way. I did not vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill in some kind of assumption that that guaranteed that BBB would pass. These are separate bills, and they each have great merit on their own two legs. And I'm thrilled that the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed. And there are important parts of the Build Back Better Act now that we need to make sure pass in 2022 as well. Probably most impactfully, the child tax allowance and the universal 3- and 4-year-old pre-kindergarten. The president's agenda is not dead. It's stalled in the Senate. We saw this, frankly, with the infrastructure bill as well, right? The House passed the Invest Act, which was a totally different version, went to the Senate. The Senate sat on it. They negotiated with the president. That fell through. Then a different group of senators got together. They negotiated something. That went to it. It's Congress. Things get volleyed back and forth and changes get made, and we pass something with BIF. And I've got great confidence we can pass something with the Build Back Better Act.
Okay. And tell us what's in the infrastructure bill that specifically helps our Charles River Chamber communities.
In general, I think the improvements to transportation, excuse me. I mean, Greg, you've been a long time evangelist on this issue, but transportation is linked so deeply to housing and to business development. And the investments that we're making with the bipartisan infrastructure bill in not just roads and bridges, but in public transit and in giving cities and towns and nonprofit groups the flexibility to apply for on-demand transit and micromobility and pedestrianizing areas. All of these things create what I call a general business environment that's improved.
And how long will it take before we start to see that kind of change or the benefits of that bill?
Money starts flowing next year. This year, excuse me. Now it's 2022, so this year.
Okay. And Build Back Better, you mentioned the child credit. What else is in there that's really important to you?
So I think to start with, it's the Build Back Better Act. It's been covered in the media as sort of as a price tag and a process, right? It's been covered as here's the price tag now, and here's the latest iteration of the process that we're in. To me, it's more helpful to talk about what does this do for people? It does three big things. One, it lowers healthcare costs. So it empowers Medicare to negotiate drug prices. It makes hearing aids more affordable for senior citizens. It expands Medicaid. It expands the Affordable Care Act to make insurance premiums lower for low-income Americans. So make healthcare cheaper. And that's a big chunk of the $7,500 in savings that an average family of 4 would have. Number two, it creates Social Security for kids. Great legacy of the Roosevelt and Johnson administrations was this creation of a standard of living that we just wanted to guarantee for every American, particularly for older Americans through Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. Children actually were kind of left out of that promise, though. And starting with the Children's Health Insurance Program of the early 2000s, we've included children in that promise. And the Build Back Better Act, to me, completes that promise, or at least makes a big stride forward. It does that with the tax allowance, which is fully refundable now, and which in the last year of its existence looked like it reduced childhood poverty by about 35 to 40%. It does that by making childcare more affordable. And it does that by making 3- and 4-year-old pre-K universally accessible. So number two is Social Security for kids and the concomitant reduction in costs for families for childcare. And then number three is climate action. This bill is by far the largest US investment in carbon neutrality in history. In fact, the largest investment by any government in carbon neutrality in history.
Okay, thank you. And I want to remind everybody that if you've got questions, we will try to get to them. Just put them into the Q&A and we'll try to get those in a couple minutes. Let me ask about some of the local business relief programs. As you know, the restaurant relief program was underfunded. Many more restaurants that would have qualified just couldn't get money because they ran out of it. We don't have the programs that the fitness industry had hoped for funding programs for them. Hospitality businesses, the same thing. The PPP program, which made a huge difference for businesses, is gone. We're still in a huge economic crisis right now in terms of our businesses. Is there any reason to hope that Congress will come back with some more money for any of these things?
Well, there's significant money still at the state level. I mean, so the American Rescue Plan sent $5 billion to the Massachusetts state government, excuse me, only about half of which has been spoken for at this point. There's another half of it left to be spent. And Congress wanted to defer to the states to use those funds as necessary for their own business environments and for their own support, both for unemployed as well as for businesses that were hurting. So plenty of money still there. The most important thing that we can do, though, for businesses, in my opinion, is keep the economy open. We need people continuing to consume in-person services, right? Which have been such a huge casualty of the pandemic. And to that extent, keeping schools open, keeping the economy open needs to be a priority for the governor and really for all elected officials.
Right. So, but as you know, here in Massachusetts, the legislature didn't want to spend all the money that came down through ARPA, and the money they did allocate has been really slow. It was slow to be approved and everything. Did you find that frustrating watching our state house move so slowly on getting those dollars out?
I think the State House wanted to be deliberative and consultative as they did that, which is fair. When you've got one-time money, you need to put it towards either emergency uses or one-time uses. And they spent the summer doing a wide range of hearings on the allocation of ARP funds. I think got to a pretty good place where they're giving direct payments to low-income essential workers, doing a huge investment in housing production, which, Greg, I know is critical to you and to me as well. Boosting the unemployment insurance fund. So I think overall they've done a pretty thoughtful job of allocating the funds.
Yeah. So I guess one thing I would say is that you're right. There's a lot of good things in there. There's not that kind of emergency relief that our businesses need right now. And I would just kind of suggest that I think that Congress ought to look too at getting money back for that restaurant relief program that was underfunded. Many restaurants, including restaurants in our communities, weren't funded for that. And something like a PPP program can make a big difference too. So just wanted to mention that. Can you help us? Here we are in this kind of moment where we've seen this deadlock in Congress and all the other things we talked about earlier. Can you help us feel any less pessimistic on January 5th, 2022 about our government and where we're going?
Yes, I can. First of all, I would say, I'm not sure it's fair to say there's been deadlock in Congress. We've been talking about infrastructure for a decade, and we passed a bipartisan infrastructure deal that makes a generational investment in water, transit, high-speed internet, energy. That's a big deal. I mean, if we stripped away some of the noise around the process, like that would be a defining event for the first year of a presidency. Passed $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill. I'm old enough to remember when $1 trillion was still considered a huge sum to be spending on these things. So that was done with both parties and was not deadlocked. Like I said, the American Rescue Plan cut child poverty by about 35%. That's like great society level success, again, in the first year of an administration, and came out of statute out of Congress. So we can still get stuff done. Is Congress a fully functional institution? It is most certainly not. And the critical breaking point for Congress is the filibuster. We cannot be a body that reflects the will of the people, and that is really a first among equals branch of government as it was intended by the founders, insofar as senators representing about 14% of Americans can block anything. We've got to abolish the filibuster. It's that simple.
So, but you do agree in general that the overall political climate that we're in is infuriating, frustrating, terrifying.
It is. The biggest concern I have is the divorce from reality that we have seen from about 30 to 50% of the GOP. We've gone from a place back, what was it, 10, 12 years ago, where the former Republican governor of Massachusetts, whose signature initiative was to expand healthcare access, was the GOP standard bearer and had a civilized, reasonable presidential campaign against Barack Obama, right? We went from Barack Obama versus Mitt Romney in 2012 to now a situation where, as we're seeing in Republican primaries across the country, you're not a viable candidate unless you avow that the election was stolen. That is insane how far things have slid away from a reality-based shared truth. I mean, Greg, you and I can both recall here in Massachusetts when Newton, Massachusetts had a Republican mayor and a Republican governor at the same time in the 1990s. You can't even conceive of that these days. the GOP in Massachusetts has gone so far off the rails. So it's just, it's not a good situation when one party feels like they have to not just govern, but also be the guarantors of the constitutional order.
So here's a comment in the chat. Am I completely overreacting to think we'll see outright political violence in the next few years?
Are you completely overreacting? I don't think that's completely overreacting, given that we saw political violence a year ago. So no, I don't think it's completely overreacting. What I think is that we can't agonize, we've got to organize. We know the legislation that we need to pass. Some of it's passed the House already. We got to pass it to the Senate. That means getting rid of the filibuster.
Yeah.
And we also can't just throw up our hands and assume that the midterms are going to wipe out Democrats in the House and Senate. That's just, a year is an eternity in politics. If this Omicron surge comes, it declines rapidly as data from South Africa and London and England, suggests that it will. We start to see improvements in the supply chain that get inflation under control. The pandemic is mostly behind us. And all of a sudden people are like, wait a minute, we've actually got a strong economy. Pandemic's behind us. Inflation is now tamped down. And the party in power could actually have a surge of favorable approval ratings September, October. So there's a lot of runway left ahead of us in these midterms.
You were at the Newton inauguration. Both the Chief Justice and the mayor and City Council President all talked about the broken civil discourse here in Newton and how it mirrors the national trend. Give me a sense of, were they overreacting? How do you feel about it?
What was resonant with me is that the Chief Justice, the City Council President, and the mayor all use the word trust. Mm-hmm. And I just completely agree with them. It's interesting, the single biggest predictor of, in general, how well a society can function is how well people respond to the question, in general, strangers can be trusted to do the right thing. And that question has been being polled by the Pew Research Center for decades now. And the metric's going down. In America, we just don't trust each other as much as we used to. We don't trust one another as much as we used to. And that is bleeding over into a lack of trust with institutions, national institutions in particular, but increasingly state and local ones too. We need to find ways to foment greater interpersonal trust. It's one of my biggest concerns with how much kids use online media and video games as opposed to in-person interactions. We need face-to-face interactions to build that interpersonal trust. And we also need local and civic institutions, the Rotary Club and healthy local newspapers. When young people ask me for advice about how to engage in politics, the first thing I always tell them is, delete your Twitter, delete your Facebook, and just go knock on doors and go get involved at the local level. And that's the healthiest way that we can fix this country, is organically from the bottom up.
Good answer. I got a couple of submitted questions here for you, Congressman. Has the Treasury responded to your and Senator Markey's request for them to reconsider the calculations in debt management so mass municipalities can use ARPA funds with the flexibility Congress intended? I don't know if you can speak to that.
Not yet. It is a top priority for me. I spoke with Secretary Yellen one-on-one directly about it, and we have worked very hard to ensure that the entire Massachusetts delegation, Senate and House, is on the same page here. And I am remaining focused on it. It's a big issue for the district.
Another one, you brought up the filibuster. Do Dems have the clout strategy eliminated? Secondly, what can we do here in Newton to help you?
Do Democrats have the cloud strategy? I didn't understand
Cloud
that.
Strategy to eliminate the filibuster. And maybe that's maybe more likely. You really think it can happen? I think might be the real question.
Oh, okay. I mean, ultimately, it's going to be up to Senator Manchin. It takes 51 votes to do it. Mm-hmm. And, I don't want to put myself in rooms that I'm not in right now, but I imagine that the president can pick up the phone a certain number of times with critical senators and say, I need your vote on this, right? You get so many phone calls when you're president of the United States you can make that probably really move the needle. If I were Joe Biden, And I was wondering how to use those phone calls. Number one would be, Joe, we have got to abolish the filibuster for voting rights legislation. That would be number one issue right now, because we've only got a few more months before state legislatures, sorry, Greg. Need a glass of water. We've only got a couple more months before state legislatures start enacting legislation that could permanently undermine the integrity of elections. As you know, as I'm sure most of our listeners know, elections in America are not federal. They're not. We don't have national elections. We've got 50 state elections. So we need federal policy that sets basic ground rules for what state legislatures can do.
Who's the most interesting person you've met on Capitol Hill that's not an elected official?
That's a great question. So I would say, this may not quite directly answer the question, but it intertwines with another one that was being asked about how we can best help do this.
Mm-hmm.
There's an organization called Protect Democracy, which is a group of Obama-era attorneys who formed under the Trump administration to sue the Trump White House when they broke the law. Greg, give me a second. I got to get a glass of water.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. And while we're waiting for the congressman to get a drink of water, a reminder, we can get your questions into the Q&A. And I'll tell you that tomorrow we've got a great chamber program at 11 o'clock in the morning where we're going to be hearing from 4 local businesses about how they're dealing with returning to the office under COVID. So we're going to be hearing from someone at Rockport, someone at Spindrift, someone at HCR, which is a financial management company, and Big Belly Solar. So I'd love to have you join us for that. I think it's going to be an important and timely conversation tomorrow at 11 o'clock, and you can sign up for that on the Chamber's website at nnchamber.com. In fact, I see that Catherine has just put a link in so you can register for that event while the congressman is getting a drink of water. And we can look while we're doing this at his couch and that blanket there. Can you tell us about the blanket on the back of your couch there, Congressman?
Sorry about that.
That's right.
I got that blanket during orientation, and it looked like a good backdrop. So. Yep,
nice. All right. So, any further thoughts you have? Can you think of a person though that you maybe met? You go, wow, this really is like.
So I'm a nerd, and I think that the parliamentarian for the House has an incredibly interesting job because they are tasked with calling balls and strikes in a way that is both incredibly, can feel very, very minute and trivial, and yet has a huge amount of leverage over what's in order, what can be debated, what is allowed to be included in a reconciliation bill, like a budget bill, for example. And that role embodies so much of what we value about our institutions. It is apolitical and yet operates within the fiercest of political dynamics. And that's so much of the damage that was done over the last 4 years, is the blurring of the lines between those two things.
Okay, here's the inverse question, and I think you're going to dodge this one on me, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. So who did you meet on Capitol Hill that you thought you'd be impressed with, but turned out to be a phony?
That I thought I would be impressed with, but turned out to be a phony. Well, I'm in Capitol Hill is an interesting place to do that. You're right. I'll give you kind of a dodge, which is I think one of the most raw moments for me on January 6th was watching people vote to decertify the election results, who I know did not actually think the election results were false. And I'm an elected official. I understand what it means to have pressure on one side or the other and to have to take a tough vote. I get it. But what I saw them do was be so afraid of losing their job that they couldn't do their job. And because the job's definition is to uphold the Constitution. I mean, it's literally what you swear to do. And I said to myself when I watched them do that, I said, I never, ever want to get into a place as an elected official where I feel that kind of fear, where I feel like I can't follow my conscience or I can't uphold the Constitution because I'm afraid of losing an election. Like that is just such a dystopian vision of what the job is. I found that deeply unimpressive. And it's not a partisan thing. It was just a deeper thing than that.
But so you've actually had conversations with colleagues who say, I totally know that this is BS, but I'm voting that way anyway, or
I have had conversations with those colleagues on the GOP side who had said, I tried to talk them out of it, and they just said they had to do it.
Right. So I know that you are one of those willing folks to go on Fox and talk. Tell me why you think that you should do that and why you do it.
Well, for some of the reasons that you intimated before, but how polarized we are as a country. And the two things that have done that to us probably more than anything else has been the combination of the primary system and cable news. And there are reforms to both that I think are important, but we cannot allow the cable news ecosystems to be entirely self-contained, or else we're just never going to be able to talk to one another as a country. So when Republicans are hitting us constantly on inflation, for example, I wrote an op-ed about here's 4 ways that we can tackle inflation together, and go on Fox News and talk about inflation and talk to independent or Republican voters about it. So I'm going to continue to do that on issues that are very, very salient to Americans, and try to have a healthy dialogue that doesn't devolve into just ad hominem attacks or tweet name calling.
So have you been on with Sean Hannity or Carson Tucker?
No.
Would you do that?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think if that meant being able to explain a key priority or trying to discuss an important policy item to a large audience, I think that's a critical part of being elected officials. You got to talk to Americans.
Right. Okay. So here's another submitted question along those lines. If you won't work with 30% of the House, how can there be bipartisanship?
Well, because there's 20% of the House GOP that I can work with and do work with. And indeed, I believe, the first House Financial Services Committee member to pass bipartisan legislation out of the House Financial Services Committee. I would just say this commitment to not work with that 30%, not only does that not, to me, undermine bipartisanship, it actually reinforces it, because I've got 2 jobs, core jobs in Washington. One is to represent the values of my constituents, and the other is to advance their priorities. And those 2 jobs oftentimes have a slight tension to them. And by being very clear about here's the red line, here's where I feel like, even if it might help advance a priority, it no longer represents the values of the district. But if I'm very clear about where that red line is, then it's much simpler to figure out, okay, well, now with this remaining crew, let's work together and find solutions. I'd also just put, as a pragmatic note, the people who voted to decertify are also the ones who are by far the least likely to have ideas that we would be working together on in the first place. They tended to be, the most socially conservative.
Mm-hmm. So yesterday, I think it was, you announced that you raised $2 million in campaign fundraising last year. And I don't mean this question disrespectfully, I just can't get my head quite around what this means, but because I know our system is really dependent on fundraising. What does that buy? What is it? Why is that so necessary?
Yeah, I mean, Democrats are going into, as we discussed, a pretty tough midterm election cycle. And we know that the president's party tends to lose seats historically in a midterm cycle. One of the things that we've seen from Bob Drinan through Barney Frank through Joe Kennedy from the Massachusetts 4th is that this seat is a source of political and financial capital for the Democratic Party. This is a heavy hitter district. Massachusetts is a heavy hitter state. And fellow Democrats kind of expect that it's going to be a source of strength. And so by doing effective fundraising and forming a leadership pack, what I'm demonstrating is I can be a source of strength for Democrats nationally.
So just to clarify, you don't expect to use that $2 million or most of that $2 million for your own campaign, you expect to use it for others?
Well, that's not up to me. That is up to my opponents.
Okay. If you don't have opponents or you don't have a significant opponent, then that's what happens to that money. I'm just trying to get a sense of.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody wants to, for example, jump into the Democratic primary and challenge me, then I've got to run for re-election, and that's going to be expensive, and then that drains my ability to be a source of strength for the Democrats nationally. So the decision about whether the Massachusetts 4th is a seat that helps Democrats nationally or a seat that has to have internecine squabbling in a tough midterms is really up to other people who might get in for their own ambition.
Here's one. What streaming TV series did you watch over the holidays?
My wife and I have a very hard time agreeing on this. And so we always default to kind of simplistic crime dramas. And right now we've been watching Ray Donovan.
All right. Okay. Any others?
No, that's about it. We get about 20 minutes a night and then we both fall asleep.
Well, there you go. All right. So I really just have one more question for you. And I've probably asked you this one before. I've asked it many other times, but and I'll let you go because it sounds like you got a cough and you got some kids that could use your attention too. If you could go back into history at any point in time in history just to watch something happen in the history of the world, just as an observer, you can't change anything. You can just be there and watch it. What would you like to go back and watch?
Ooh, Greg, you have great questions. I'll give two answers, and people are going to say like these are basic answers, but they're basic for a reason. I mean, these are such compelling people. I think one would be, there was a period of time when Washington was the general of the Continental Army, when his aides de camp were Lafayette, Alexander Hamilton, and John Lawrence, who John Lawrence unfortunately was killed in battle a few years later, but very impressive guy. And obviously Hamilton and Lafayette have become superstars. Sitting in and watching the four of them just talk about stuff of an evening would have been incredible, because those were four incredible people. And then Frederick Douglass came to visit the White House and spoke with President Lincoln. I mean, hearing that conversation, that would be something.
Great answers. And two that I haven't heard before from in all the years I've been asking that question. Congressman Auchincloss, thank you so much for being with us. The best to you, and go there and fight for us out there in the halls of Capitol Hill.
Greg, it's always a pleasure. Sorry for the cough. It's an occupational hazard for being a politician. My throat gets dry from talking so much. So
there you go. Thank you very much. All the best to you. Thanks everybody for watching. We will send a video of this out to everybody who registered. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.